Hello YouTube and welcome to the Awesome Blackness channel, or ABC for short. My name is Mighty, and on this platform, I'm going to explore the awesomeness of our black people. That's right, whether you're big or small, celebrity or civilian, anywhere in the world, if you're awesome, you're featured here. And it's time to drop another nugget.
5, 4, 3, 2.
Okay, so off top, shout out to this viewer for the suggestion for this video. Ooh boy, what a doozy. As much as I believe that I was through with highlighting anti-villains, ambigu heroes, antaga, neither, or whatever other morally gray monikers you want to attach to those with questionable methods to their madness, I'm brought right back to the thick of it. However, I feel that in this case, it is with good cause mentioning them, as their presence right here and now seems to be more apropos than perhaps the last few rebels for the cause that I've covered. Let's first introduce you to the game in which they appear though. Developed by Irrational Games and published by 2K Games, Bioshock Infinite is the third installment in the series. Released worldwide for the Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, and OS X platforms in 2013, with a Linux-based port released in 2015. Infinite is set against a multi-dimensional, retro-futuristic motif. The game is considered part of the immersive sim genre, combining first-person shooter and role-playing elements, giving the player freedom for how to approach combat and other situations. Additionally, the series is notable for exploring philosophical and moral ideologies with a strong in-game narrative influenced by concepts such as objectivism, total utilitarianism, and ethnocentrism, among others, as explained. Like the others in the Bioshock series, Infinite's story pulls from historical events as recent as the 2011 Occupy movement. However, much like its predecessors, the game takes place in the early 20th century, set in an innovative floating city that was commissioned by the United States to be the showcase of American exceptionalism. The city of Columbia premiered at the World's Columbian Exposition, i.e. the Chicago World's Fair, in 1893, and what began as an endeavor of achievement and hope as the city made an ambassador tour both nationally and internationally went horribly wrong for the American government when, in 1901, during the Boxer Rebellion, American hostages had been taken. Colombian forces intervened without sanction from the U.S. government and destroyed the city of Peking, China. The destruction of the city caused the death of untold natives and demonstrated the danger that Colombia posed to the rest of the world. When the floating city revealed not only to have asserted autonomy, but was also heavily armed, a rift emerged between leadership in Colombia and Washington, resulting in it being recalled to American shores. In response, the city's founder, Zachary Hale Comstock, seceded from the Union and the following year disappeared into the clouds. Comstock, having grown contempt with his former country's sense of progressiveness and in much of the same tone-deaf sentiment behind a certain chant of today, he viewed Colombia as a symbol of true American political and religious ideals. However, the floating city would only be great for one set of citizens. For the others, among whom were minorities and the working class, Colombia was viewed as the bastion of xenophobia, classism, and puritanicalism, no different than the land they had left or were stolen from. Backstory aside, the game itself begins a decade after the city's secession with player character Booker DeWitt, a disgraced member of the Pinkerton National Detective Agency, discharged after his actions at the Wounded Knee Massacre. He is sent to Colombia to retrieve a young woman that had been kidnapped by Comstock. Booker rescues her, but their escape is hampered by the fighting that has developed essentially between the haves and the have-nots. Among the latter is Daisy Fitzroy. Fitzroy initially appears as an ally who transports DeWitt to unscrupulous businessman and one of Columbia's founders, Jeremiah Fink's base in Finkton, a factory town that also serves as a prison. However, she soon shows her true colors as an extremist, wantonly killing Fink, painting her face with his blood, and eventually threatening to murder his innocent son. Aside from the aforementioned, what would bring her to such an act, you may now be asking yourself? Well, not much is known about Daisy's origins, other than she was brought to Columbia by Fink, hence the animosity, who used his contacts on the ground to procure Negro convicts for menial labor within the city. Shortly after arriving, she was employed as a housekeeper for Lady Comstock. Daisy admired Lady Comstock, believing her to be genuine for someone on such a high pedestal. However, she fled the Comstock house after being framed for the death of Lady Comstock, forming the Vox Populi within a few weeks of her escape. At first, the Vox is merely a nebulous group of protesters, as their name, Latin for voice of the people, suggests. But as it becomes more organized, its members grow cohesive and militant. As an aside, though the Vox did not claim to adhere to any particular ideology, their original goal was to breach the divide between Columbia's privileged few and the rest, erasing the social and racial boundaries imposed by those in positions of power and privilege. Years after Daisy's escape, she was arrested by authorities in Finkton. She was sent to Dr. Francis Pinchot at the Comstock house, who interviewed her over a period of a week. After participating in an intelligence test conducted by the doctor, it was learned that Daisy had a genius-level intelligence, scoring even higher on the test than the doctor himself. As a result, the doctor's supervisor, Dr. Kitterly, suggested that the scientist perform a lobotomy on Daisy to make her more docile and servile. By then, fascinated by Daisy, Dr. Pinchot felt that the procedure would render her useless and refused. As Daisy's lobotomy was planned, Dr. Pinchot tried to intervene. He was accused of forming a connection with Daisy and thus ignored. The night before the last of Dr. Pinchot's interviews, he wrote of Daisy's plan to be broken out of the facility and how she requested his help. The doctor handed over his keys to Daisy, as well as all the money he had on him. Despite his help, Daisy shot and killed him before escaping. Idealism turned to bitterness once the revolution broke out in Columbia. The Vox simply going from appropriating all that belonged to their oppressors to now driven by vengeance, destroying and vandalizing entire portions of the city, executing anyone standing in their way. They also torture any innocent citizens they come across, inflicting upon them the same oppression they lived through. In the end, Vox Populi members can be seen murdering, robbing, and terrorizing civilians in the wealthiest part of the city. With the momentum of the group now out of her control or moderation, Daisy becomes a sacrifice for the cause. Physically, her presence in the game is short. However, just like another infamous queen of a revolutionary brood, she is infused within the backdrop of almost every scene, which is why what makes her awesome is apparent. Daisy is an intelligent and determined woman whose goal is justice and retribution for the downtrodden citizens of Columbia. She is shown to be highly resourceful, outwitting Columbian authorities and procuring resources for her movement from organizations owned by the founders themselves. Although Daisy inevitably organizes the Vox Populi into a bloodthirsty army, which ultimately embarks on a reckless, wildly destructive, and demonstrably anarchic campaign, she still has a sense of humor and self-righteousness. She is shown to deeply care about her cause for freedom, as revealed, and was willing to sacrifice herself for the ideals. Couple of fun facts. Though comedian and actor Aisha Tyler was considered to perform the voice for Daisy Fitzroy, recording 47 minutes of dialogue, she was ultimately not used for the part. Tyler quipped on her own podcast that she didn't think she sounded, quote, black enough for the character, unquote. It's all good, babe. I probably don't sound black enough for this channel, but you still had me from slow jams. Nevertheless, Kimberly Brooks, whose vocal talents indeed watered this Daisy, was more than competent, with close to 200 credits to her name, including, strangely enough, Batgirl.
You don't stand a chance.
Proving that it works both ways, people. You want a champion for more accurate representation, you're going to wind up taking work away from the very same people you're knighting for, so just keep that in mind. And also, on a uber flip side of it, I guess she can sound white enough for that part? Who knows? Last fact. T.C. Carson, aka OG Kratos, was also in this game, as briefly mentioned in my video on him. He was Street Preacher Ray, or Brother Ray Love. When protagonist Booker DeWitt arrives in Shantytown, Love is seen giving a speech to a small group of lower-class denizens at the town square concerning the would-be movement of the Vox Populi, as he appears to be an ally of them. He, like Daisy, audibly is present in key points throughout the game, lending to its atmosphere, and thus completes another 6 degrees of separation I unintentionally established. Spooky cookie, as my brother would say. Okay, so thanks for watching. And again, thanks for the interesting and awesome request to see your suggestion in a future video. Make sure to comment below and stay engaged in all of my social media. Speaking of which, the channel is now also on Facebook because, yeah, I'm staying consistent with coming late to the party. Link provided in the channel bio and description. One last thing, in the ever expansion plan for this movement, a website is coming, a one-stop shop for all things awesome. I'm excited. Stay tuned for that. For the immediate future, keep it locked for the next video. And in the meantime, if you like what you've seen, you keep the love coming the best way you know how, by liking and sharing. Get more people to like, share, subscribe, and click that notification bell so you know when I drop another nugget. And until then, stay awesome.